In 2007, Aaron McLean's life seemed peaceful and happy in a small town in Tennessee. The town was known for its peaceful environment and friendly neighbors. The sun shone through the treetops on the streets, children played in the yard, and family gatherings and community activities became part of daily life. Against this backdrop, Aaron lived with her husband, Eric McLean, and their children, which seemed to be an ideal family picture. As a young mother, Aaron shouldered the responsibility of the family. She not only had to take care of her children's daily life, but also had to take care of the family's financial expenses. Although life was full of challenges, she tried to stay optimistic and did her best to create a warm home. She often took her children to the park and participated in community activity, trying to make her children feel happy and safe. However, this superficial happiness conceals the potential crisis. Aaron's disappointment in marriage deepened. Eric was always busy with work, often working overtime, and was exhausted when he returned home. He was indifferent to family affairs and even unwilling to participate in the children's trivial matters. Aaron tried to communicate with him, but it ended in quarrels every time. Eric always used his busy work as an excuse and could not understand his wife's deep pain and desire. This emotional gap made Aaron feel helpless. She began to doubt her own value and sense of existence and felt that she was just a tool to take care of the children. Not a person who was loved and cherished, she longed to be understood and hoped that someone would listen to her voice, but this desire became stronger and the lost day by day. Against this background, Aaron began to seek other emotional sustenance. By chance, she met 17-year-old Sean Powell at a community event. Sean was a boy full of youthful vitality and vigor, and his smile and vitality instantly attracted Aaron. When talking with Sean, she felt a long-lost sense of ease and happiness, and that feeling made her feel as if she had returned to her youth. Sean is passionate about life. He shares his dreams, ideals, and visions for the future, which rekindles Aaron's hope for life. With his company, she finds the long-lost happiness and satisfaction. A relationship beyond friendship quickly develops between them, and a secret relationship becomes a way for Aaron to escape reality. As time goes by, the relationship between Aaron and Sean continues to deepen. At first, they simply chat and share each other's lives, but soon, this friendship evolves into a more complex and secret emotional connection. They would meet in a small cafe near the school and enjoy the afternoon sun together. They would also stroll in the park and discuss each other's life ideal. With Sean, Aaron found the long-lost feeling of being noticed and loved. This secret relationship makes Aaron feel excited, but it also brings a huge psychological burden. She knows that this relationship is immoral and dangerous, but deep in her heart, she can't resist the feeling of being loved with Sean. She seems to have found a way to escape reality. She is no longer the lonely, helpless, and neglected young mother, a person full of vitality and hope. However, this relationship did not bring real happiness to Aaron. On the contrary, it became a burden deep in her heart. As she dated Sean, she gradually realized that she was betraying her husband, Eric. This guilt and remorse intertwined, making her feel even more painful whenever she saw Eric working hard for the family. The guilt came like a tide, making it almost impossible for her to breathe. Nevertheless, when she was with Sean, she could temporarily forget these burdens. She was intoxicated by the feeling of youth and fearlessness. With Sean, she could be herself, not the woman who was overwhelmed by family responsibilities. This contradiction made Aaron fall into a deep struggle. Although Aaron's relationship with 17-year-old boy Sean Powell initially brought her a brief happiness and an opportunity to escape from reality, over time this relationship gradually became a burden deep in her heart. Whenever she was immersed in the sweet time with Sean, the guilt and uneasiness in her heart followed her like a shadow, reminding her of the immorality of this relationship at all times. In the days with Sean, Aaron experienced the long-lost youthful vitality and passion. Sean's youthful aura made her feel a rekindled vitality, as if she had returned to her carefree teenage year. However, every night when she returned to her empty home, facing Eric and the children, Aaron had to face the deep loneliness and guilt. This emotional struggle put Aaron in deep contradiction. She longed to be with Sean and longed for the feeling of being loved, but at the same time, she knew that this relationship was wrong. Deep down, she knew that she was betraying her husband, Eric. and this sense of betrayal was like a thorn that always hurt her heart. Whenever she shared the little joys of life with Sean, her inner uneasiness would surge like a tide. She began to reflect on her choice and wonder if this relationship was really worth it. Although Sean gave her short-term happiness, could this happiness make up for her avoidance of family responsibilities? Self-doubt made Erin feel painful. During her relationship with Sean, Erin gradually realized that she was escaping reality. She put all her energy into this secret relationship and ignored her due responsibilities to her family and children. Whenever the children sought her attention and love, she was often absent-minded. This state made her feel guilty, but she could not do anything about it. As time went on, this avoidance behavior began to show its cost. The atmosphere in the family became more and more tense, and Eric's indifference and neglect towards Erin began to become obvious. He noticed his wife's mood changes, but he could not understand the reasons behind them. Communication between the two almost stagnated, and quarrels and cold wars took over, making the originally warm family cold and alienated. Against this background, Erin had to start reflecting on her marriage. She and Eric had many beautiful memories in the past. They had experienced the ups and downs of life together and welcomed the incomparable joy of the birth of their children together. However, now these beautiful memories seemed to be overshadowed by the quarrels and indifference in reality. Erin began to doubt whether she had made the right choice. She once thought that she could fill the void in her heart by establishing an emotional connection with Sean. But now she found that this approach only exacerbated the growing gap between her and Eric. Every night when she tossed and turned in bed, the guilt followed her like a shadow, making her unable to sleep. In this secret relationship, Erin gradually lost herself. She became more and more dependent on the emotional support brought by Sean and neglected her role as a mother and wife. This feeling of losing herself made her feel terrified, and she began to worry that if she continued like this, she would be completely lost in this relationship. Whenever she thought of her children, she felt a stab of pain. As a mother, she had the responsibility to provide a warm and safe environment for her children to grow up. Rather than putting them in the conflict and emotional entanglement of their parents, such self-blame made Erin more painful, and she realized that she was pushing the family into an irreversible situation. In this context, Erin felt more and more lonely. She longed for Eric's attention and understanding, but found herself becoming more and more marginalized in the marriage. Whenever she tried to share her inner feelings with Eric, she would encounter his indifferent reaction. He was always busy with work, and his mind was not on family affairs, which made Erin feel lost. At the same time, the secret relationship between Erin and Sean gradually developed. Although she knew the relationship was immoral, she chose to indulge in it in loneliness and loss. This emotional struggle made it even more difficult for her to face the growing rift between her and Eric. She began to realize that she was betraying her husband, but she was powerless to change the situation. When Eric finally learned about the affair between his wife and Sean, his anger erupted like a volcano. At that moment, he felt betrayed and abandoned, and all the problems he had not noticed surfaced instantly. He could not control his emotions, and the anger, loss, and despair intertwined, making it almost impossible for him to breathe. Eric began to frequently question Erin, trying to understand the truth. He was confused by his wife's changes, and at the same time, he blamed himself for not being able to detect the problem in time. In the quarrel, he showed extreme uneasiness and anxiety, and every quarrel seemed to tear the last bond of the marriage. This emotional fluctuation made him feel painful, and Erin fell into endless despair. Quarrels became the norm in their lives. Whenever Eric questioned Erin, she always had difficulty finding the right words to respond. She wanted to explain her feeling, but was afraid of the pain caused by revealing the secret relationship. This contradiction made her more painful, and Eric continued to increase his accusations against her in anger. "Why did you do this?" Eric asked angrily. "Aren't we always trying to maintain this family? How could you betray me?" Every word stabbed Erin like a knife, making her feel ashamed and desperate. "I don't know what to say," Erin responded in a low voice, tears flowing down uncontrollably. I just feel lonely." But this sentence did not calm Eric's anger, but made him even angrier. He could not understand the real pain in his wife's heart, but just felt abandoned and betrayed. This anger was not only dissatisfaction with Aaron, but also a deep loss of his own powerlessness. Eric began to reflect on his behavior. He realized that he had neglected the importance of family while busy with work. He thought painfully that if he could spend more time with his wife, maybe things would not have developed to this point. However, this self-blame did not alleviate his anger, but made him more confused. I have paid so much for this family, but you chose to betray me. Eric roared, "You make me feel worthless." This extreme emotion plunged the relationship between the two into a deeper quagmire. As the quarrel escalated, the relationship between the two became more and more tense. The once warm and happy home is now full of hostility and indifference. The children also feel the tension in such an atmosphere. They don't know what happened between their parents and can only bear it silently. After every quarrel, Erin fell into deep self-blame. She realized that her choice not only hurt herself, but also hurt the children. How will they grow up in such a family environment? This guilt is like a shackle that binds her and makes her unable to escape. For Eric, he also began to realize that the cracks in the marriage were not caused unilaterally. He began to reflect on his behavior and tried to find a solution to the problem. However, under the interweaving of anger and loss, he often couldn't deal with the problem rationally and could only choose to continue quarreling. Faced with escalating conflicts, Erin and Eric both realized that they had to find a solution. However, this was not an easy thing. After countless quarrels, both of them became exhausted and developed a deep distrust of each other. This distrust made any communication extremely difficult. That night, Eric returned home and found Erin's cheating with Sean. The anger in his heart erupted like a volcano and he couldn't control himself. He asked Erin, "What do you want? Why did you betray me?" This backlog of emotions made him unable to think rationally, and anger and loss intertwined, driving him to make an extreme decision. In the fierce quarrel, Erin tried to explain her feelings, but Eric couldn't listen at all. He only felt betrayed and abandoned, and this emotion pierced his heart like a knife. His voice became louder, and his emotions became more and more excited. "You make me feel worthless. I have given so much to this family, but you chose to betray me." UV break at this time, Erin was also overwhelmed by the long-suppressed emotions. She felt extremely desperate and tears burst out. "I don't know what to do. I just feel lonely." This sentence was like adding fuel to the fire, making Eric even more angry. He couldn't understand the real pain in his wife's heart, but he felt that he was abandoned. Intertwined with anger and despair, Eric was driven to the extreme by emotions. He began to recall everything he had done for this family, those hard-working days, and those sacrifices of giving up personal time for the children. At this moment, he felt a deep sense of powerlessness and the pain of being betrayed intertwined, as if the whole world was against him. At this moment, he saw the pistol that had been placed in the corner. At that moment, a thought flashed through his mind. If he couldn't make this betrayer pay the price, then what right did he have to continue living? This thought eroded his reason like a devil and made him make an irreversible decision. He rushed to the pistol, his heart full of anger and despair at that moment. He didn't consider the consequences, just wanted to use this method to vent the pain that had been accumulated in his heart for a long time. So he picked up the gun and fired at Sean. Bang, the gunshot cut through the night sky as if it was a warning from the god of fate. Sean fell on the spot, and Eric stood there, shocked by the choice he had just made. At this moment, he realized that everything he did would change the trajectory of his life forever. As the gunshots rang out, the tranquility of the small town in Tennessee was instantly broken. On the originally quiet street, neighbors leaned out one after another, with confusion and fear on their faces. People's eyes were focused on the open door and window, and the shock of the gunshot echoed in their ears. No one expected that such a tragedy would happen in their familiar community. The sirens pierced the night sky, and then the police and emergency personnel quickly rushed to the scene. Their arrival brought a little order to the originally chaotic situation. But for Erin, everything seemed extremely strange and terrifying. She stood there. Tears could not stop flowing, and her heart was filled with despair and fear. Erin's mind was blank. She couldn't believe that all this was actually a real scene in her life. She thought her life was just in a marriage crisis, but at this moment, She realized that things were beyond her control. She felt extremely lonely, as if the whole world was against her. "This is not real," she murmured to herself, trying to convince herself that this was just a dream. However, when she saw the police enter the house and see Sean lie on the ground, the feeling of despair surged like a tide, almost suffocating her. With the arrival of the police and emergency personnel, the scene became more chaotic. The police began to cordon off the scene and question witnesses while the emergency personnel were busy giving Sean first aid. Erin stood aside, feeling extremely helpless, and could only watch all this happen. "What are you doing?" She suddenly rushed forward and tried to stop them, but was stopped by a policeman. "Please calm down. We need to investigate." Although the police's words were gentle, they made Erin feel more desperate. She knew that she could not change anything, and everything in front of her seemed to be mocking her powerlessness. During the police investigation, Eric was arrested. When he was taken out of the house, his face was full of anger and despair. He couldn't understand why he'd come to this point, and he couldn't believe that he would become a criminal. In his opinion, all this was to protect his family, but now it has become the biggest mistake of his life. "Why did you do this?" Erin couldn't help shouting, hoping to get an explanation. However, Eric just looked at a loss, not knowing how to respond. He knew he was wrong. But at this moment, the anger and despair in his heart made it impossible for him to face his wife rationally. As Eric was taken away, Erin fell into a deep panic. She realized that this tragedy not only changed the lives of Sean and Eric, but also had an irreversible impact on her and the children. The children were still young, and they could not understand what happened between their parents, let alone the pain of losing their father. How should I tell them? Erin was filled with fear. She knew she had to face this cruel reality, but she didn't know how to start whenever she thought of the difficulties the children might face. She felt suffocated. As Sean's shooting caused an uproar in the town, the media quickly intervened and became a magnifying glass for this tragedy. Major news channels reported the incident one after another, and reporters rushed through the streets of the town trying to dig out more details. People began to pay attention to the stories hidden behind this tragedy, discussing social issues such as domestic violence, emotional disputes, and youth relationship. The originally quiet life in the town was broken, and people on the street began to talk in low voices and talk about it. Neighbors gathered to try to piece together what had happened. For many, the incident was like a bolt from the blue, shocking and disturbing. During these discussions, some neighbors began to question the happy image that the family had once presented. They always looked happy. How could this happen? Someone lamented such comments stabbed Erin like a knife, making her feel extremely painful. Erin once thought that her marriage with Eric was happy, but now people looked at her with suspicion. She felt isolated and as if she had become a sinner in everyone's mind. Whenever she walked out of the house, she could always hear whispers and whispers, which made her feel anxious and uneasy. The media's attention to this incident also made Erin feel at a loss. Cameras and reporters lingered at her door, and she had to face the flashing lights and harsh questions. How do you feel about your husband's arrest? What do you think of this tragedy? These questions pierced her heart like a sharp knife, and she didn't know how to respond. Under such pressure, Erin chose to remain silent. She didn't want to expose her emotions to the public, and she didn't want her children to see her vulnerable side. However, the silence did not reduce the outside world's attention to her, but made people more curious. As time went by, Erin felt more and more lonely. Although the neighbors cared, they looked at her with scrutiny, which made her unable to really relax. She began to avoid contact with others, was unwilling to participate in community activities, and no longer communicated with friends. The originally warm town has now become indifferent and unfamiliar. Whenever night fell, when she sat alone at home, the loneliness became more obvious. She thought of the happy times in the past and shared the bits and pieces of life with Eric. But now all of this has become a distant memory. She didn't know what the future would be like, nor did she know how to face the next life. As a mother, Erin was most worried about how the children would face all this. That night, she hugged the children tightly in her arms and tried her best to give them a sense of security. However, in the innocent eyes of the children, she saw endless anxiety and doubt. "Mom, why doesn't Dad go home?" the little daughter asked innocently. This sentence was like a thorn, which made Erin feel heartbroken. She didn't know how to answer, so she could only lower her head and stroke her children's hair with her hands, trying to hide her tear. Dad has something to deal with. He will be back soon. This was the only excuse she could think of. Deep down, she knew that this lie could not last. What the children need is a real and stable environment, but at this moment, she could not provide them with such a sense of security. As the incident developed, people in the town began to reflect on their lives and family relationships after this tragedy. They realized that superficial happiness may cover up many potential problems. Many people began to pay attention to domestic violence, emotional disputes, and mental health issues, and these topics gradually entered the public eye. Some community organizations began to advocate family education and mental health courses, hoping to help people better understand the importance of emotional relationships. They hope that through these efforts, more people will realize the importance of communication and understanding so as to avoid similar tragedies from happening. Although the outside world is full of doubts about Erin, she still longs for understanding and support in her heart. During this difficult period, she tried to find someone to talk to, but found that people around her seemed to look at her with strange eyes. This loneliness made her feel more painful, and she hoped that someone could understand her struggle instead of just seeing herself as a criminal. In order to find inner peace, Erin decided to join a support group. There she met many people who had experienced similar difficulties. They shared their stories and confided their pain to each other. In the process, Erin gradually realized that she was not alone, and many people were experiencing similar struggle. As time went by, Erin began to try hard to rebuild her life. Although the outside world was still full of doubts about her, she understood that she had to create a safe and stable environment for her children to grow up. In the support group, she learned how to face her emotions and gradually found ways to cheer up again. I can't let this tragedy define my life. This is Erin's belief. After countless sleepless nights, she finally decided to face the future bravely and fight for a new beginning for herself and her children. People in the town also gradually awakened in this tragedy. They began to reflect on the importance of family relationships and realized that communication and understanding are an indispensable part of maintaining a happy family. Some community organizations have launched discussions on mental health and family education, hoping to help more people build healthy interpersonal relationships. This change makes Erin feel relieved. She hopes that through her own experience, she can arouse more people's attention to domestic violence and emotional crises. Although her life has changed dramatically, she still believes that everyone has the opportunity to reshape their future. This tragedy is not only a personal misfortune, but also a warning to society. When facing an emotional crisis, people need to learn to talk and communicate, rather than choose silence or extreme behavior. At the same time, it also reminds us to pay attention to mental health issues in order to create a safer, healthier, and more understanding social environment for the future. Through this story, we see the struggles of a young mother in the face of a marriage crisis and the importance of impulsive behavior that may lead to extreme consequences. This tragedy reminds us of the importance of communication, understanding in emotional relationships, and how to properly handle conflicts to avoid irreversible consequences of impulsive behavior. At the same time, it also warns us of the importance of paying attention to the mental health of teenagers and family education in order to create a safer, healthier, and more understanding social environment for the future.